Thank you. Firstly, let me begin by congratulating you on this fantastic center. I just took a tour of the Innovation Center and it looks brilliant. I think you have done a great job in setting this up in such short notice, and I'm sure you're going to go from one success to another as the years progress. So great work. This is actually the first time I'm giving a physical talk after the start of the pandemic, more than 2 years since the last conference I was in Delhi last February. So it's actually a very special meeting for me because I like going to places, meeting people, and this has not happened in a long time. So I'm very happy to be here. Just a small clarification to the introduction that was just given. I am immediate past co-chair of Global Young Academy. I have handed over charge, so this bit of my introduction was slightly old, so I thought I will just clarify that. I have a problem here, so somebody from IT, can you just come up? I cannot see my screen on the laptop. The ল্যাপটপের স্ক্রিনটা অফ আছে, একটুখানি অন করে দেবেন তাহলে সুবিধে হয়। Just give us a minute for the technical issue. Dual screen করা নেই বোধহয় আপনার। ঠিক আছে। Okay, so I was asked to speak on sustainable development goals, primarily on the theme of ecology because that's what I work on. So instead of taking up just the theme of the presentation, I decided to have a fancy title for my talk. So I call it The Tangled Bank and the Future of the World. And I hope as I progress through my talk, both portions of this talk, the Tangled Bank and why I'm talking about the future of the world, is going to become evident. So why the Tangled Bank? How many of you here have studied evolution? So all of you know who Charles Darwin is, right? Good. So in the next slide here, now this has stopped moving. যাচ্ছে না। So the slide here, you see Charles Darwin, a very nice painting of Darwin, and I quote the very last paragraph with which he ends his classic book on the origin of species. He imagines the world and he says, it's interesting to contemplate a tangled bank, clothed with many plants of many kinds, with birds singing on the bushes, with various insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth, and to reflect that these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and dependent upon each other in so complex a manner, have all been produced by laws acting around us. And here he ends because the law that he is talking about, of course, is the law of natural selection that he has spoken of elaborately in the entire book. So if I ask you to close your eyes and imagine, imagine is something we rarely tell kids to do these days in school or in college. We just tell them, read what is there in the book, mug it up, and write your exams and get marks. But I'm asking you to imagine what Darwin would have imagined the Tangled Bank to be like. And here is an artist's impression of such an imagination of the Tangled Bank. Now, if I tell you, think about what biodiversity is. We have been hearing this term biodiversity for many years now. It has now become a colloquial terminology. Everybody talks about biodiversity loss of species. We talk about how many tigers we have remaining in which forest of India. But we rarely think of the smaller parts of life or the smaller entities which actually take up majority of the Earth's biomass. So there are more than 1 million species of, for example, ants all over the world. you don't even think about them when we think about biodiversity, and we think it's okay to kill all of them, they're but pests. But they're not. In fact, one raging problem worldwide now is the loss of biodiversity, where pollination is being affected because there aren't enough bees. If there aren't enough bees, there won't be enough honey. But that is not the only problem. If there aren't enough bees, many flowers are not going to go into the next stage of producing fruits. And that is affecting the entire market economy, where in terms of agriculture, in terms of production of fruits and many vegetables. So this is a huge problem that we have to think about. And that is why we have to think about biodiversity in all its varied forms. So when I ask people, think about biodiversity. What is biodiversity? If you look at the technical or classical example or definition of biodiversity, which is accepted by all, which is given by the United Nations Environment Program, it is variety of life on Earth, of course, and includes all organisms, species, and populations. Includes genetic variation among them, which is something which has been incorporated now because we know that genetic variation matters, and in the time of the pandemic, we all understand now what variants are, because we had alpha, we had beta, we had delta plus, now we have Omicron. So everybody is talking about variants. Whether we understand the real meaning of it or not, we at least know them by term. And then we have communities and ecosystems. If I tell you, think about a place where you'll see a lot of biodiversity. Give me some examples. Where would you go to see biodiversity? A forest. Where else? Desert, yes. Coral reef, excellent. Where else? Mountains. Yes, I have all of them here. You read my mind. I have exactly those 4 images on my slide here. What if I told you, you don't have to go anywhere? It's a pandemic, you cannot travel. That does not mean you cannot study biodiversity. Go here. Where is this? That's Eden Garden, that's Kolkata, not very far. Can you think of studying biodiversity in Kolkata? It's a city, too much pollution. No, Delhi, yes. I'm saying, can you think of studying biodiversity going to Kolkata? If I wanted you to go study biodiversity, you would think of Sikkim, you would think of Sundarban, you would think of Digha, not of the middle of Kolkata, right? Doesn't make sense. But it does. And it's very important that we think about it, because we live in cities and biodiversity exists everywhere on Earth. You don't have to go to a biological hotspot, an ecosystem hotspot, to study biodiversity. And this is the message I want to give everyone, that when we think about sustainable development, we cannot think about sustainable ecosystems only in places which are away from us, away from urban civilization, and think about development in the cities. The two have to go hand in hand. Here are some more images. All of them, I'm sure, you would have seen in your day-to-day life. Crows, cats, mynas, they are very much part of our urban ecosystem. Incidentally, all of these images are from my house. Not in Kolkata, in Kolani, because that's where I live, but other than the sunflower, all of the others would be seen in my parents' house in Kolkata too. Not the sunflower, because they don't have sunflowers in their garden, that's it. But they would have some other kinds of flowers. So this is part of an urban, very much urban ecosystem. Now, other kinds of things that we see in the urban ecosystem, animals, are of course us. You know, when we think about the ecosystem, we typically keep humans aside. We are humans. We are special. No, we are not. We are special in many ways, yes. We cause the maximum damage to this globe on which we live. We are special, yes, because we kill each other and in the process kill others. We are special, yes, because we throw garbage in each other's backyards. We think it's fine. But when it comes to biology, we are not that special after all. Of course, we wear clothes, we have medicine, we have antibiotics. So we do better than some other creatures on earth in some ways, but not in every possible way. I often tell my students in class, if I gave you nothing, I took away your clothes, I took away the mineral water bottle, I took away your cell phone, I just left you in a forest, in an uninhabited island without any tools, how long do you think you'll survive? There will be wild animals, you won't even know where to start looking for food because you've never done it. Our ancestors knew how to look for food, how to decide what is poisonous, what is non-poisonous. You wouldn't. You have not learned to make tools. You will not be able to hunt. You'll get bitten by mosquitoes, you'll get malaria and dengue. How long will you survive without all the things that technology, civilization has given us? Think about it. We are not that different when it comes to biology. And of course, we are a very important part of the ecosystem, especially in the urban habitat. Because an ecosystem, as we define it, is a community. It's a biological community where we have organisms which interact with each other. And in the urban ecosystem, or even the rural ecosystem, humans are part of it because they are interacting with other organisms present in the ecosystem. Of course, in the urban system, we have us, we have many birds, some mammals, we have reptiles, we have amphibians, we have insects of all kinds, and often we don't think about these when we think about conservation. We think we have to conserve large animals, fancy animals. We don't think about the smaller parts of life that also need to be conserved and thought about. We have interactions like those between prey and predator, host and parasite, competition between species over food, over shelters, over mates, etc. And any urban ecosystem has a large number of scavengers. We have dogs, pigs, cows, crows, mynas, rats, cockroaches. All of these are scavengers in our habitat. In some ecosystems, like this image here, in the US, you can even have bears which are scavengers. There are coyotes which are scavengers, which you would not think about as scavengers, but they have changed their lifestyle to get habituated to this new ecosystem which has taken over their original homes, and they have become scavengers. But the question is, why should we care at all? Fine, they're there, Why should we care if somebody is dumping garbage? Why should we care if there is pollution? Why should we care if somebody is burning dry leaves outside in the park? I can shut my windows and switch on my AC. I don't care. That is the attitude we typically have. And I'm trying to tell you why we should care. Because it's a tangled bank. If I take this one simple image from the slide, which I had shown you earlier, there's a sunflower, there's a caterpillar, and there's a honeybee. All three of them are individual creatures, but they are connected. If I look at all the images I was showing you, there was a cat, there was a myna. Cats can eat the eggs and the chicks of the myna if they get them. So they have a prey-predator interaction. Both the myna and the crow are in competition over the same kind of food and nesting sites. They can both eat the caterpillar. The caterpillar is here feeding on the sunflower, which is food for it. The sunflower needs the honeybee for its pollination. The sunflower is also providing food to the honeybee to take back home in terms of nectar and pollen. The caterpillar, of course, destroys the sunflower. The honeybee helps the sunflower. So you have a complex ecosystem right there in one flower pot in my garden. And the list can continue to grow. So I am a behavioral biologist or an ethologist. And people like me, there are very few in India, unfortunately. we study the behavior of animals. I like to say we peep into the private lives of animals. We try to understand how animal lives and why an animal lives the way it does. So why does an animal have a certain kind of lifestyle as opposed to another? Why are some animals scavengers while some animals are predators? Why do certain animals produce only one offspring at a time, whereas some animals produce a large litter? Why are there some creatures which only give birth once in their lives and some give birth multiple times in their lives? So there are many questions which you can ask in terms of evolutionary questions, and then we can address them by looking at the day-to-day lives of animals, and that's what people like us do. And in my research, I do just that. Just to tell you why we should care. This is, of course, again, something that we are all very aware of. Does not need an introduction. This is a particle. It's not even considered as a fully living organism. It's a particle approximately a little more than 100 nanometers in size. You cannot see it. You would not even know it existed until it hit us. And it has hit the entire world, is driving all of us mad. Now, when the COVID infection hit, there was a lot of flurry among people, among scientists, among the media people, among policymakers to tell us how to behave and how not to behave. There were infographics being created like this, told us to maintain physical distance, wear a mask, whether animals will spread COVID, whether bats are, because bats are spreading COVID, should the trees be cut to kill the bats, etc., etc. There were a lot of questions and a lot of answers which were being produced. What you have to understand is, much before we got to understand or got to know what will kill the virus, what vaccine will work and what will not work, we were coming up with a lot of answers based on understanding of the behavior of the virus. So that is also understanding behavior at a much different scale. So in order to conserve species, in order to destroy species, in order to fight with species, the behavior, the ecology of those species is very important for us to understand. Unfortunately, this is something that we rarely do. We think one size fits all, and we come up with a policy, and then after 10 years we say this policy failed because it worked for species ABC, it did not work for species XYZ. And of course it will not, because one size does not fit all. The first thing that we learn in evolutionary theory is that there is variation, and that is the root cause of diversity. I work on dogs. We call our lab the dog lab. Not very innovative, yes. People come to our lab and often ask, where are the dogs? And I tell them they're out there on the streets, wherever you see them. The lab inside has only people, because we don't study fancy breed dogs or pet dogs. We study stray dogs on the streets of India. This is just a glimpse of our homepage, which has a lot more information. So when I tell people I study dogs, this is the kind of dogs that we think of, nice looking dogs, cuddly dogs, fancy dogs, expensive dogs, dogs which need a lot of money to be cared for. And they typically ask me, which breeds? What many people don't understand is that we know all dogs, from the Chihuahua to the Great Dane, all dogs are the same species, Canis lupus familiaris, very closely related to the grey wolves, and we know that they have actually evolved from grey wolves from what is now known as a process of domestication. And another surprise is that the majority, up to 70 to 80% of all the dogs in the world, if you take all dogs in the world together, then majority of this population is not comprised of the breeds, but of free-ranging or stray dogs, like the ones you see on the streets if you step out of your campus. They, what we call the strays, technically called free-ranging, are also Canis lupus familiaris. they are probably the condition which is somewhere out here, where they were hanging around humans, going around behind them with for food, sometimes helping them to hunt, and generally hanging around the human settlements, but not taken as pets as we know them today. All breeds that you see are genetically actually very similar because we have created them through breeding programs, through artificial selection. They are all man-made, just like the race horses we have, just like the Jersey cows we have, just like most of the vegetables you eat. How many of you know that your cauliflower and cabbage, your broccoli and your spinach, all of them are artificially produced vegetables. All of them have originated from the wild mustard. If you go and tell a farmer of today that cauliflower and cabbage come from the same plant, he'll hit you on the head. But originally, yes, the parent plant is the wild mustard that we see them growing around here in the fields. So that's what artificial selection can do, and the artificial selection can produce breeds which look very different, but genetically they are not. Where do we find free-ranging dogs? Often people say these stray dogs are an Indian problem. Excuse me, they are not. They're there in more than half the world, especially in the global south and some places like Russia and Italy. They are very much a population, widespread, interacting with the humans, living in urban, semi-urban, rural habitats, mingling with humans on a regular basis. The red shows you the distribution of free-ranging dogs in the world. Of course, here we know the humans and dogs share a love-hate relationship. Some people go out of the way to even put sweaters on dogs on streets, feed them regularly out of bowls, give them vaccines, give them treatment. Some people go out of their way to kill all the puppies born in their neighborhood by poisoning them. This image out here, very gruesome, is actually from the news about 3 years back from NRS hospital in Kolkata. Of course, we also have to remember that dogs cause rabies, and India has a huge burden of rabies. And no matter how much we love dogs, we have to keep that in mind that they are also a part of the cause of the rabies burden in the population. This is one of my favorite stories, which I always like to show, justifying, in a way, why I study dogs. This is a story taken from the internet, published somewhere around November 2018, of this dog in Nepal, some village dog in Nepal, which followed these trekkers who were going on an expedition of a very difficult peak near the Everest, and it actually makes up to the summit following them. You can see it's not a very furry dog. It's not supposed to be there on the snowy peak. And at the end, these people are actually feeding the dog after they've made it to the summit. There's images taken in the summit. This reminded me of another story that I think all of you will identify with. What story is this? The Pandava is going to heaven and the dog follows. And who made it to heaven? And? Yudhishthira and the dog. But this is not going back to glorifying our country for 3,000 years ago, but telling you that 3,000 years ago, the dogs on streets did not behave very differently from the dogs on the streets today. If they found a human they liked, they followed the human. They do it till now. I have had umpteen number of dogs following me and even sometimes getting into trouble because they go into a different territory and those dogs then chase this dog. So dog behavior has been very steady in terms of interacting with humans over centuries, which gives us an entire laboratory of nature to work on, which is the streets of India. So they are an interesting model system. They can help us understand evolution, ecology, behavior. We in this subcontinent have a long and shared history. So as I said, it's a natural laboratory. And This is something that we need to do to understand how to reduce conflict, which is actually constantly on the rise. I keep getting phone calls, interestingly, from campuses across India, mostly IITs. We have a dog problem, can you help us solve it? And I say, no, it's not a dog problem, it's a human problem. So that is where we have to first identify the problem, identify the cause of it, and only then we can find sustainable solutions to the cause. So what do? We try to understand how dogs interact with each other in terms of behaviors like mating, parental care, interactions between siblings, territorial interactions between groups, competition over food space mates. We try to understand how they interact with humans, looking at humans as resources, looking at humans as threats. We also do experiments on cognition to understand how smart dogs are in terms of solving tasks, in terms of distinguishing between less and more quantities to judge whether they can understand them and go for the higher quantity of food, for example. And in doing all of this, we are trying to put together small small pieces in the puzzle to understand the big picture. We also look at food preference, by the way. We are trying to understand the big picture of how the dog became man's best friend. How I connect this to the Sustainable Development Goals? There are definitely 3 goals that my work connects to. One is towards good health and well-being, because as I said, dogs are a major threat due to rabies, and in order to come to this One Health approach of managing health as well as the source of the disease, you really need to understand the behavior and the ecology of the species. Of course, sustainable cities for the future need to include biodiversity, and that is why we need to study urban ecosystems and urban adapted species on a very large scale, and this is a classic example of an urban adapted species. And of course, this is part of life on land. Let me introduce you to the lab, which is, as I said, full of people, PhD students, master students, and I don't have spaces on slides and to put the number of interns we have. Right now, I think there are a dozen people doing virtual internships. So we have data from all over the country because people like dogs and they want to do internships and gain some experience. And then we have volunteers spread out across the country. Let me give you some glimpse of what we know. We are still scratching the surface of knowledge, but we have found some things over the last 12 years in which we have worked. So for example, we know how active a dog is, how a dog spends its day, and how this is connected with human activities. This is Orunita, who has just finished her PhD, and very interestingly, she has decided to go on doing science communication and not doing science research. Again, something which I think students of science should consider doing more and more, because science needs to go out to the public in a language which is understandable to them, not full of jargon. But unless and until we take science to people, we cannot expect to have a country where people have scientific temper, which is something that our constitution tells us that we need. But in the last 70 years, we haven't achieved any bit of it. So Orunita did this work where she was trying to look at what we call time activity budget, and she was basically hopping onto a train, getting off at a station, taking a long walk into the city, recording dogs wherever she saw them, and she was doing this as long as the trains were running, and also on campus during the late night hours when it was not safe to be walking around outside. In doing this, we have 5,669 sightings of dogs. These are not numbers of dogs, but sightings on different days and times over a period of a year. And we had all kinds of behaviors, which we categorized into inactive and active behaviors. Inactive, we had behaviors like self-behaviors, where an individual is seen either sitting, walking, resting, or grooming itself, or eating by itself, or you have interactive behaviors between 2 or more individuals. And then using all of this, this is where I tell students, if you want to study biology and say, I don't like math, so I will study biology, you are going to get stuck at one point of time, because interdisciplinary research is the key word these days. You take all of these, and what do? You put them through a lot of statistics. And this is a very simple graph, just plotting the activity levels in different hours of the day, starting from midnight to midnight. But then we run this through statistics, which tells us that the dogs were primarily active, which is 50% or more activity from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., which is also overlapping a lot with the time when humans are active. When we sleep, dogs also mostly sleep. They are not really running around looking for food, chasing vehicles, fighting each other when we have gone to sleep, which is unexpected because you would expect them to be more active nocturnally when humans are inactive, but is not the case with dogs. When you look at a dog's life on the street, very early in the time that we started, Manubi and Srijoni were my two students who had joined, and they started looking at very basic population level data, and we found that there is a time in the year when you see a lot of pups in the population, which is the winter. And then the numbers decline. So we said, where do the pups go? Obviously they die. So we tried to understand what kills the pups. And why is there this peak, which means that the pups are being born at a specific time of the year, so there is seasonality of birth and then death. And we found that yes, there is a lot of death. Survivorship actually decreases as the pups grow older. And it's quite bad. If you see here, this is high survivorship at birth, and then very low survivorship when they are 7 months old, which is when they attain adulthood. That's the earliest stage when they attain adulthood. And the pie chart here gives you the various causes of death. We have natural causes like disease, worms, dog being bitten and killed by another dog. There are causes which are human influence, like poisoning, beating so badly that the pup dies eventually, car run over, things like this. 31% pups go missing because typically children pick them up, take them home, parents drive out the pups, these pups don't survive, unfortunately. So highest mortality actually happens when the pups are 34 months old, which is also when they wean and become more and more independent from the mother. This is also when they're running around without being constantly supervised by the mother, and they are dying, mostly being run over by cars or being chased by other dogs. And human-caused death, either directly or indirectly, add up to almost 63% of the deaths in the population. So we are their biggest predators if you look at the urban ecosystem. We looked at how much care a pup receives when it's born. This is important because when we look at, again, pet dogs, we help them to mate, we help them to give birth, sometimes through C-sections. We feed the pups, nurture them, nourish them, give them vaccines. But then, in nature, the mother has to do all of it. And we wanted to know how good she is at doing this, given that she is in this urban environment with a lot of stress around her. So we looked at behavior called denning, which is considered to be maternal care before birth. Srijoni was looking at this work where she went around finding pregnant mothers and where they are giving birth, characterizing these dens using physical features, and then looking at what kinds of spaces they are giving birth to, how close they are to humans, how close they are to resources, etc. These are images from our old campus, which you will recognize, where this was the old campus of ISA Kolkata. This is no longer the campus of us now. What we found was that mothers are not really avoiding humans. Urban animals classically are known to avoid humans when they give birth. They hide their offspring from humans. Here, dogs go and give birth close to humans, sometimes in their balconies, sometimes in their gardens, because we see the dogs with their pups are also being pampered a lot by humans around them. They're given extra food, sometimes a torn blanket, sometimes plastic sheets to protect them, and this helps them. And we found that they try to stay close to resources, but they don't stay very close to resources either, because that can cause more competition and aggression from other dogs. And they also depend mostly on humans, show much more begging behavior when they have given birth than they do otherwise. We also did a study to ask, but we are seeing all of this, is this by chance alone? Is it that we are reading too much into the data? We always have this kind of a problem when we are looking at animals. Are we interpreting it correctly? And it's always good to play devil's advocate with your own work. So Srijani actually painstakingly followed pregnant females around for days, tracking where they would rest, where they would dig, where they would rest for more than 2 days in the same place, which is typically what they do when they choose a den. And she asked the question, are the mothers actually just selecting dens randomly or choosing? So there were 20 pregnant females for which we finally got this data. Following them for a month, we found that each female had between 2 to 6 intermediate dens. The first den in which she was resting, the final den in which she gave birth, and 2 to 6 intermediate ones. And we gave these dens scores, which we had used in the original paper, and we found that the final dens were always better by the same estimates we had checked out for than the intermediate and the initial dens. So the mothers were actively choosing and rejecting one den site for another when they found a better one. So they were actually investing in den site selection. And this is very important to understand when you are in the urban ecosystem, when there are animals around you. If you understand what gives them shelter, you are going to cause much less disturbance, because often dog bites happen because there are protective mothers around and people are interfering with their pups. So these are pups in my backyard, just to show you that they can give birth very close to humans. And this is literally, in my outhouse. This time we were standing there when this birth was happening. This is me taking a photo while a pup is popping out. And they absolutely don't bother if there are humans around, if there are familiar humans around, of course. Unfortunately, all of them are dead. Some disease killed the entire family. Maternal care post-birth. I'm going to try and rush through because I think we're running late. Manubi did this work on 22 groups of mothers and their pups, following them from the 3rd week of the age of the pup to the 17th week. And we found that when the pups are growing, gradually the mother decreases care shown towards the litter. And we also found that the mother does not keep increasing care if she has more and more pups, which means when there are smaller litters, the pups get more individual care, but when there are larger litters, then the pups will get less individual care. So for lesser litter sizes, it is advantageous for the pups because they have less to compete with among their siblings. But then, if you have no siblings, you don't get to play, you don't get to learn a lot of social interactions. We found that as the pups grow older, the mother very nicely balances her investment in active care, which is energy consuming, and passive care. So active care actually decreases, which is the red line here, as the pups grow older, and passive care steadily increases. And the different kinds of behaviors in which she invests time, the pink one here is nursing or suckling behavior. The green one here is protection. The colors here and the colors here are very different. So you see here, if you just look at the stacked bars, the colors are changing in their heights and their distribution over the week of the pups. So it means the mother is not showing same kind of care to pups of all ages. And it's the same litter for which the mother is redistributing her care. And of course, as the pups are growing older, the nursing behavior is reducing. That is the most energy consuming behavior. And after a point, when the pups are 14, 15 weeks old, nursing stops entirely. We observed weaning, which is the tussle when the mother wants to stop feeding the pups and the pups want to continue. And this is something anybody who sees dogs around would know, that often there are actually, I know people who will tell me, this mother is obnoxious. She runs away and the pups try to feed, so we have to hold her down and make her nurse. And I tell them, please don't do it. You're doing a disservice to the mother. She will not be ready to give birth the next time. Again, a very interesting evolutionary theory given by Robert Rivers. Parent-offspring conflict. He designed this for humans, but it's true of all animals, where a mammalian mother has to give care. She cannot eternally produce milk for one batch of offspring. She has to regain her reserves to invest in the next batch. The mathematics is beautiful, based in genetics. We actually observed weaning behavior very, very beautifully in the pups and the mothers. Weaning behavior starts around the 8th week of pup age, peaks during the 10th week, and phases out during the 13th week of pup age. I'm not going through the details of each of these graphs because of the lack of time. But this is what I liked. We made it into a timeline of development, just like we have milestones in development for human babies. Up to 7 weeks, the mother is giving a lot of care, actively coming and offering to nurse the pups. After this, weaning starts when she is trying to spend less and less time and not nursing them as often. After 13 weeks, the pups also don't want to suckle anymore. Mother is still taking them around, offering them food, teaching them how to scavenge. And eventually, after 16 weeks, all of this stops and the pups get more and more independent. And that is why maximum mortality also happens. We found something very interesting, and I like to call this the Great Indian Giant Families. We found that in groups, in this Venn diagram, we have pups in which there was maternal care alone in 5 groups. Then there were groups in which there were 3 groups in which there were males caring for the pups in addition to the mother. 3 groups here where there were other females caring for the pups in addition to the mother, and 10 groups in the middle where other females as well as males were showing care. We didn't know whether the males were fathers, so we called them putative fathers. The mothers the allo mothers who showed care at a level much lower than the mothers. I don't know if the video will play from here. Let me just try. Yep. These are all putative fathers. This is the best one. So he regurgitates and the pups feed. This is a very typical maternal behavior, very rarely seen in males. So the putative fathers, so just like we looked at the distribution of care for the mothers, we looked at the same for the fathers, and what we eventually found statistically significantly is that mothers feed and fathers play. Very different roles for the 2 kinds of adults in the family group. So, in case of allo mothers, we actually saw nursing. And we said this does not make sense. They might show care in terms of grooming, playing, protection, but nursing. When I have my own pups, why should I feed milk to another set of pups, no matter how close they are to me genetically? So why were they doing it? So when we went and checked, we found that if you look at initiation of nursing behavior, the open circles are for mother initiated, the red triangles are pup initiated. Allo mother initiated nursing is all sitting on the x-axis, which means allo mothers are not initiating, they're not volunteering to give milk to the other pups. The pups are grabbing milk from the allo mothers. And we found this data is based on almost 600 bouts of allo suckling. And we also saw termination is 100% allo mother initiated. So basically what happens, pups come, they try to drink milk from any mother which is around. Allo mothers realize this is not my pup, they kick them off and run away. So allo mothers were victims of milk theft. We were very happy to find this because milk theft is something which is known in herd-living herbivores like giraffes and deer, where nobody knows whose calf is who. and they're all moving together and they are just sharing milk. It has never been reported in a canid species, leave alone canid, never been reported in any carnivorous species as of now. Just to tell you that allomothers are always maternal relatives. They are grandmothers, older sisters, and aunts of the pups. So pups have an increased chance of survival, having caring mothers, helping aunts, sisters, grandmothers, putative fathers, and only about 1 in 5 survive. So next time somebody tells you there are too many pups in the neighborhood, tell them, just wait a few months, they'll all die. They're very efficient scavengers, competing with others. Right now we are doing a nationwide experiment in which we see the scavenging guild, which is actually majorly birds. And large number of birds, which we did not even think are scavengers, are actually coming and scavenging when you give food, which is very interesting. And of course, we have goats, cows in all kinds of places. Cows are even coming and eating rice with chicken gravy, believe it or not. I don't know whether I'll get that data published. We did an experiment to understand how good they are at sniffing out meat. Without going into the details of the experiment, we found that anything which has been laced with the smell of meat is eaten first. And these are small pellets of bread we created, soaked them in water and chicken stock, and then diluted chicken stock. And they will actually smell the one with chicken stock first, then and eat it, then go to the dilute chicken stock, then lastly they'll not leave out anything, but they'll do it in that order. And then came Rohan, who said, but this was a very nicely laid out experiment on a platter, and they have all the liberty to smell and eat. But what happens when they go to the dustbin? So we did the dustbin experiment. And in the dustbin experiment, Rohan would put 1 box with raw meat, 10 pieces of chicken, 5 pieces of chicken, 5 pieces of bread, 10 pieces of bread, and all of this is mixed up with a lot of garbage. In the lab, we actually have a big box full of garbage collected from the streets, which is used to mix up with all of this. And the dogs are given just 1 minute to come and feed. First experiment done with 96 dogs, and they still came to the protein and ate it first. And so they out from the distance itself, they can choose which one has the best food. So they were still using this rule of thumb: if it smells like meat, eat it. We have done a more complex experiment in which we have given this experiment to a group. This paper is being written up right now, in which we showed that the first one who comes to this, called the first responder, will go to the mixed box and the protein box equally. The second responder will go to the mixed box more than the protein box, because the first responder has already started eating from the protein box. And the rest of them have to just go distribute themselves wherever they find food. Very quickly, I'm going to take you through a set of experiments which we are trying to do on dog-human interactions on the streets, taking ideas from what people have shown in pets and said this is intrinsic dog behavior, and we are testing it out on the streets to see whether this is really intrinsic. So we look at humans as a source of food, and all of this work has mostly been done by Debuttam, who is now a postdoctoral Marie Curie fellow in Utrecht. We try to understand how good they are at finding food using pointing gestures. So test condition, there's a pointed bowl, and control condition, no pointing. The pointer does not know what has what, because it's double-blind experiment. We do it with pups, juveniles, and adults. And what we find is pups readily follow pointing. Juveniles and adults are not different from 50-50, so it's not it's random whether they'll follow pointing or not. Interestingly, when you do the experiment thrice, then adults show both positive and negative reinforcement, which means if they follow your point and get food, next time they'll follow again. If they follow your point and get fooled, they'll not trust you. Immediately they'll decide you're not to be trusted, they'll go the other way. This is shown by adults only. Interestingly, we did momentary pointing, which is more complex, and distal pointing, which is again more complex, which pet dogs find it difficult to understand. Momentary pointing, you just point once and stop. Distal, you hold your finger but from a distance. Our dogs are better at understanding the complex pointing than the simple pointing. Probably because they are not used to people going so close to the food and holding their finger close to it while they eat. They are used to us throwing food. So they probably understand this gesture much better than if you go close down to the bowl and point towards it. Probably they take that as a more threatening gesture than anything else. They are good at understanding body languages, differentiating between a friendly gesture, a low impact threat of raising your hand, high impact threat of raising a stick. So why I'm showing you this, next time somebody tells you I go on morning walks and dogs run after me, I'm scared of dogs, just tell them you don't have to do anything, just carry a 1 meter stick. That will keep the dogs away, whether they are in a group or they are solitary. If they're in a group, they get a little more aggressive, but they also understand the stick better than anything else. Chasing them away does not help if you don't have a stick. So this is the same experiment with groups, and again, I'm not going into the details of the graphs because of the lack of time, but in both cases, the high impact threatening cue helps. Even the FPP is when they are offering them food after showing them the social gesture. So when we show them a stick and then we offer them food, the dogs don't really come because they are still scared of us. How do they build trust? This is one of my favorite experiments so far. In one set of experiments, we gave them, there is a piece of chicken here on the road, and there is a piece of chicken in Shubhro's hand. And the dog can eat from the hand or eat from the ground. And then we give the dog petting on the head. We showed that the dogs mostly prefer not to make contact but feed from the road. And even if you give them petting, they don't really change their choice. Then we did a long-term experiment in which, in this case, 21 dogs on different days over a period of 1 month were repeatedly given extra food. But then the dots show that not much changed in their response to the humans, even though we were giving them extra food every day. In another set of 22 dogs, we did not give them extra food. We just went and petted them on the head 3 times. And you see the magic. So we were very surprised, but very thrilled to see dogs build trust not based on food, but based on a show of love. And we understand that this is evolutionarily a stable strategy because people who show love to dogs out of their own urge are typically dog lovers who will not harm the dog. But there are people who lure the dog with food which is laced with poison. So it makes sense if they have learned to trust strangers who show love than to trust strangers who give them food. Interestingly, they both did a longer experiment where the dogs, one set of dogs in the control condition were given food for 3 days continuously. And on day 1, on day 5, we did the same test of pointing. And we found the results were similar. Dogs followed pointing less. In the test condition, they were only given petting. And we found that on day 5, the dogs who were given petting, 100% of them followed pointing. And they forgot to distrust you. So when you've pointed towards an empty bowl on purpose, they still continued to follow your point if you had shown them love for 3 days. That is good enough to become a friend to them. We impact them in different ways. We have done this study in different kinds of crowding zones of high, intermediate, and low crowding. And what we basically find from this is that dogs in high and middle crowded zones like cities are more approachable towards strangers than dogs in empty and rural kinds of areas. So dogs basically who interact with strangers more are more likely to be less afraid of strangers and more likely to approach if you call them and offer them food. During Durga Puja, we did a study to understand how sudden bursts of human activity and food affect humans. So there's a lot of people on the streets and there's a lot of food. So then what does the dog do? Choose high food over getting kicked around or avoid high crowding. And we found that if you look at this data, the pre-event is a month before Durga Puja. Event is during Durga Puja, and the red triangles are month after the Puja. And these are all in areas where we know the big pujas happen. So things like Badam Tola and Ekdalia, places like this, which were selected where you expect a lot of crowding to happen. And we found that the dog abundance and human flux were similar in the pre and post event, but during the event, abundance went down when flux went up. And what we found was vigilance behavior was high during Durga Puja, and the dogs were basically scattered around away from their normal sites and being much more vigilant than in the normal conditions. So summing up, free-ranging dogs have very active, complex social lives. This is what I've been trying to convey to you through all of this. We humans are a threat to their survival, but we are also a major source of food and shelter and affection for them. So they have very complex interactions with humans. In fact, there is a piece of work where you have showed that they interact more with humans than they do with their conspecifics. And all our work points towards the fact that lifetime experience with humans is likely to shape the personalities of free-ranging dogs, and that is the kind of thing that we are trying to now venture into to understand how we affect their personalities. I had begun with the Tangled bank, which is what I've been talking about until now, and I'll end with the future of the world. These are all images that we are familiar with. The first one is happening right now in Ukraine. The polar bear floating on this ice block is something that took over the internet a couple of years back. We know about the melting ice caps. We know about the Amazon fires. These are all major events which are shaking the world and putting the world at a level where we think there is no going back. But I have hope, and the hope is in people like you, people younger than you. And for you, we need to understand we cannot live without urbanization. We cannot say, go back to your roots and go live in the forests. No, sorry, we can't do that. Urbanization is a reality. We have to face it, and we have to find sustainable solutions. We need to find how species adapt to the changing environment and study urban adapted systems, study urban ecology, so that we can build resilient cities in the future, which will be inclusive of biodiversity, not exclusive, not be concrete jungles. We need to conserve our cities' biodiversity for the future for having a more sustainable urban habitat. I would like to end with this. I don't know how many of you already know about this. 2022 has been declared by the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development by the United Nations this year. The inaugural event is going to happen in UNESCO headquarters in July, but the year has already started, and this is done to understand how research in basic sciences is imperative for sustainable development. So this is the year, and I think you're having this meeting at a very opportune moment where this is something which is being discussed all over the world, and it would be nice if you can even think about organizing events around this theme. And ISER Kolkata will be very happy to guide you through this, because we are one of the partnering organizations on the global platform for this year. So I'd like to thank Adams University, the organizers of the event, the funders, government funding agencies who have been very generous in their support for our work in all of these years, and ISER Kolkata and the entire behavioral ecology team. Just give me half a minute. I want to show you something as an announcement which we have launched yesterday at ISER Kolkata. This is not really for your age group, but if you know children who are in schools, this is an event which we have launched, which is going to run for 1 month. It's a national contest of writing and drawing. Children in the age in classes 3 to 10 can participate. You can go to the ISER Kolkata website. There are all of these details. The idea is to spread scientific temper, teach students to think about science and sustainability, and we are hoping that we are going to get a lot of participants. So if you know any children, if you know any schools, teachers, please spread the word around so that they can participate in this contest. The deadline is 31st March. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation and lovely videos. So due to shortage of time, participants will be asking you questions afterwards.
Sure.
And if they have any questions regarding the contestant, they will surely contact you, ma'am. Thank you.
Sure.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, is it audible?
I can hear you.
Okay, so our next speaker is Mr. Matthew Matam. So, before starting, I would like to introduce him. He started his career with YUVA, that is Youth for Unity and Voluntary Action, an NGO based in Mumbai in 1990, and in the year 1999 founded CYDA, Center for Youth Development and Activities, at Pune to work exclusively with young people in the country. So, sir will be taking the session on innovation and poverty. Thank you, sir. Now you can share your slide.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to today's session. I like to say three things before I begin my session. First thing is that we are in a very challenging situation. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We are in a challenging situation. We are slowly recovering from impact of COVID pandemic, and there is a huge loss in various fields in the human lives as well as employment, and in the case of people losing job and businesses and everything. Therefore, I find that today's discussion is very critical for all of us. The third thing which I like to inform that the post-COVID, there are going to be many challenges, especially in the area of employment generation. And I'm sure that many students who are going to pass out will experience that it's difficult to get a decent employment at a decent place with a decent salary. However, I would suggest is that the future is for innovation and entrepreneurship. India, 300, 400 years ago, was an entrepreneurial society and a country. And India was much richer in terms of today's situation. It was told that almost 24% of world GDP that 300, 400 years ago, India was holding it. The same today, the US and USA is holding today 24% of the global GDP. Therefore, I find that it is always good that the young people move towards more employment creation rather than employment seeking. And the Prime Minister always say that let us create employment generators, not employment seekers. I think today's session, last 2 days, you are deliberating how we can achieve SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and through innovations and entrepreneurship. I think it is the right time the colleges and young people, start thinking about how we create an entrepreneurial society rather than job seekers and job provide. Going after jobs. So today my special talk is on innovation towards achieving sustainable development goals, especially with a special focus on number one, that is eradicating poverty. What I know that we are in a critical situation. You all are in a classroom or a call, and I am on a virtual, so proper interaction will not be possible. However, I like to share my thoughts next to 30 minutes, and then probably we could take some questions for discussion. Now, all of you know that there was MDG, that is Millennium Development Goals. This Millennium Development Goals, the focus was eradicate extreme hunger and poverty, achieve universal primary education, promote gender equality and empower women, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV/AIDS and malaria and other diseases, and ensure environmental sustainability, and develop a global partnership for development. Look at the first 8 goals, all were very critical that time. And it was necessary. The world was reeling under hunger and poverty. So we had to eradicate that. See, look at the way they are framed. Millennium Development. Eradicate extreme hunger and poverty. But the world could not achieve by 2015. Millennium means 2002-2015. Achieve universal primary education. The world could not achieve it. Promote gender equality and empower women. The world could not achieve it. Reduce child mortality. The world could not achieve it. Improve maternal health. The world could not achieve it. Combat HIV/AIDS and malaria. Still we are struggling with the diseases like malaria, TB. Probably we could combat to a certain extent HIV/AIDS. Ensure environmental sustainability. And we find that there's a huge environmental erosion, as well as the climate change has become a critical issue. Therefore, 15 years of efforts, and we couldn't achieve the Millennium Development Goals. And that is why another 15 years, they have come out with more of a sustainable development goal. Those goals should be sustainable there. So we need to now let us understand what is this sustainable development goal through a small video, which I like to show to you.
The Sustainable Development Goals are United Nations initiatives. The Sustainable Development Goals are United Nations initiatives. They will guide the development programs. If these sustainable development goals these are generations to shape the world.
Sorry, I couldn't show the video. I'm just moving towards sustainable development goals. So there are 17 sustainable development goals. No poverty, and I know that most of you must have discussed on these. No poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, and clean and water and sanitation, affordable green energy. Today we are going to talk about no poverty. Look at what exactly the no poverty means, to all of us. Extreme poverty means living less than $1.25 per day. See, $1.25 means almost 100 rupees, but it has enhanced to 150 rupees. That means one individual should survive below 4,500 rupees. That is, in a day. But look at that. And although we have made great efforts in poverty alleviation, over the last 30 years, more than 1 billion people still live less than 1.590 per day. Now, it was planned in 2015 while we are prepare the sustainable development goal. Now, the people below poverty line means it is around 150 rupees per day in India. That is 1.90 dollars per day, and 1 billion people are living. Let us look at 4,500 rupees per day. It is much less than the pocket money many of us who are having it. And there are 1 billion people are living below. 1 billion people are living below it. And I like to tell you that most of the people are in India itself. So that's the biggest challenge. Though India has the fifth world's biggest, GDP, but India has a huge number of people under poverty line. Now, the entire sustainable development goal number 1 focus on poverty eradication. Eradicate extreme poverty and half the number of the people living in poverty by 2030. And look at that. 1 billion people, that means half a billion people should be, above the poverty line. And this SDG is focusing on that. Look at, there's a huge, efforts to be done, especially like countries like India. And I like to tell you that after this COVID pandemic, and I'm sure that this another half a billion must have added to this extreme poverty, below poverty line. So there is a huge challenge before all of us. Look at, by 2030, reduce at least half the portion of the men, women, and children, all the ages living in poverty in all dimensions according to the national definitions. Okay, that means we need to take more than 50% of the people above poverty line. Implement nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all. Look at India. One of the social protection measures are Manrega, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, where 100 days job is provided. And during this 100 days job, people are provided and 250 rupees per day, even some places maybe 275 or 300. So that we are trying to take efforts to bring people above the poverty line. To 2030, ensure that all men and women, in particular the poor and vulnerable, have equal right to economic resources. You look at this. This is very critical for all of us. Everybody have equal right to economic resources. Do you see in India? I think it's a time for all of us to reflect. And it is almost said that 85% of India's resources were handled by few people. Now, last year, 2 years ago, we had only around 100 billionaires. And during this COVID, I think something very interesting that everybody should realize, during this COVID, another 42 billionaires added to the, that billionaire club of India. Now, when there are large number of people deprived of any resources, but certain people have gone to the, improved their economic situation, and why it is happening. All of you know that recently a study by Oxfam that 85% of the resources are held by few people. Only 85% of the people have only 15% of the resources of the country. Therefore, we have a huge task ahead. Now let us look into the access to basic services, access to water, access to health facilities, access to housing, access to clothing. Millions of people are living on the roadside. And I'm sure that even every day millions and billions of people may sleep without eating anything in the night. But you see the number of food is wasted in the hotels. You see the amount of food is wasted in the homes. But millions are sleeping without any food. Now, another area which we need to look into is ownership and control over the land and other forms of property. How many people owning property? How many people owning entitlement like housing? How many people have a small piece of land to ensure that they are the citizens of this country? And that is a challenge which India is going to face, the future days to come, and where what young people can come out with innovations and, effective entrepreneur business models and provide support to the government. Look at this, ensure significant, how to achieve this sustainable development goal. The government has come out, the UN has come out with certain plans that mobilization of resources, a variety of sources, including through enhanced development cooperation, in order to provide adequate and predictable means of developing countries to particular least developed countries. So there is, now India is a developed country. We can also come out with innovative ways, innovative models, and we can also support the least developed countries in Africa and other places. And through our technology to lift up the people who are below poverty lines. And the second way, create sound policies framework at the national, regional, international level based on pro-poor and gender-sensitive development strategies. You know that still, we are equal, both genders, male and female. Still, there is gender inequality. As long as gender inequality prevails, I think development is a distant dream. We also need to look into pro-poor. Let us also reflect, whether our policies and our program, is it pro-poor or is it something which is crushing the poor? And we are seeing that more and more people are getting into, extreme poverty. Many of the farmers, laws are favoring the farmers? Are the industrial laws are favoring the small industries? I think these are the challenges in front of to ensure eradication of extreme poverty. In all these cases, there is a great scope for innovation. See, when I say innovation, dear friends, and I think through your education, it is not that you need to become a revolutionary. You can find solution to, rather to become a solutionary to the various social problems which you are facing. That needs innovation. Innovation doesn't mean that we have to innovate something new. We can also remodify, we can also look at what is happening, make things cheap for us. I give an example. And in Pune, I met a doctor. He innovated a technology which can detect breast cancer in a low cost. Usually, if there is a breast cancer, people have to go to hospital. They end up in paying 3,000 to 4,000 rupees for different tests. But this particular doctor in Pune, he come out with a technology, a tool which can be used, and with 300 rupees, and we can detect breast cancer, and it was very beneficial to many rural and urban poor people. The people who cannot afford 3,000 rupees could afford 300 rupees for testing their breast cancer. That is a way. You can also look at problems around you. You may be facing different challenges daily, and please ensure that every challenge has got a scope for an innovation, and every innovation can a business opportunity. I think please look around you. Not only look into your textbooks and lectures and your Google screens and everything, but also look around you. What people are suffering, people are facing problem, and if every problem, can you find a solution? And an innovative solution, and each solution has got a market opportunity or entrepreneurial opportunity for all of us. Please, when you go today, probably from college to home, maybe when you return from home to college again, please look around you and look at, can we find solutions to various problems which are facing the country? Can we lift people from eradication of poverty. I give an example. I know one, all of you know redbus.in. I think some of you know the story of a redbus.in. See, redbus.in came out of a problem. You know, somebody wanted to travel from Bangalore to Hyderabad on a Diwali. You know, he was waiting, searching for a bus. He didn't get an opportunity. He was an IT guy. He got frustrated, and he thought that if plane ticket can be booked online, why can't bus ticket? And he gave birth to, redbus.in. So you also may be facing various challenges. You may be seeing various poor, and please find solution to the people who have the problems which people are facing. You can come out with maybe low-cost drinking water facilities, low-cost innovative toilet methodology. Tools, technology. You can come out with a solution to provide food to poor. So there are a lot of opportunities around you. Look for these opportunities. The more you are engrossed in notebooks, the less you will be innovating. The more you are learn from the surroundings, there is a lot of opportunities for innovation. Now, look at this. How privileged are we? Almost 20. Who is the middle class? It is not my statistic. It is a statistics by stats of India.in. See, 20% of the people in the country are earning only 4,600 rupees. That is below poverty line. I said that 150 rupees per day. Now look at those people who are earning 25,000 rupees per month are belonging to more than 90% of India's population. That means if you are earning 25,000 rupees per day, you belong to 90 to 100 category. Look at the graph. If you are earning 6,700 rupees, you belong to a 40% of the category. 9,500 rupees, you belong to a 60% of the category. That means almost 80% of India's population earns only 14,900 rupees. And if you are earning 64,380 rupees, you become top 5% of the India's population. Look at the disparity of wealth in the country. Look at and I think this is a way how we have to reduce the disparity between the rich and the poor. And that is the effort we need to look at, kind of a thing. Let us look at how we can, now at this stage, I like to say that how we can look at, I'll show you a small video, then we can look into them. I hope I will be able to connect to that video now and look at what is the solution to these challenges we can learn from.
India's first ever.
Okay.
First, the key findings of BCI multi-dimensional conflict index, which captures the multiple and simultaneous risks faced by households.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, actually the audio is not properly.
Hello, can you hear?
Sir, the audio is not properly coming.
Okay.
The video audio.
The video audio is not properly coming.
Yes, sir.
Uh, mm, can you increase the volume?
India's first step.
Can you hear now? Okay. I'm just explaining. I will just close the video. I think some problem with the video. I will continue my session. Okay. Okay. See what the video was showing that what is most important to reduce, to create an equitable society. Equitable. So education is very critical. So the roles of institute like Adamas University and many other universities is very important. But education also should lead to women's empowerment, and also it should lead to all solution to the equality, economic achievement of economic parity with everybody. So that's exactly how the Kottayam district which has achieved, and they have been continuous because of literacy played an important role, education played an important role, women played an important role. So wherever we see, the women in the leadership, we do find a change. Therefore, can we also look at various innovations and solutions, how it can help the poor and women, and also the disadvantaged sections of the people, especially people with a disability, people at high risk, and people in the remand home. There are a huge number, 100 tribes. So I think if you really want to achieve, eradicate poverty, we not only look at the larger picture of the economic development, but also we need to have to reach the needy and people, who are where we have not reached, and we need to find solution to that. Now look at to that the goal number 1, where India is today. 7.4% of the population of unemployed population is only getting $1.90. That means 150 rupees per day. Employed people. I'm not talking about people below poverty line, male. And 8.6 proportion of employed population only getting 150 rupees per day as wages. Look at the kind of, I'm not talking about overall population, I'm talking of the employed population. And India doesn't have certain data, especially this is something which India has to provide to the UN and every year to how we are trying to eradicate the extreme poverty. Look at the next one. We will, when we see the next one, see unemployment rate is 7.1% in 2020, but I'm sure that it is slightly higher today. It is almost 9% one. Now, please, when you talk about unemployment rate, it is overall unemployment rate in the country. That means if 7.1 is the overall unemployment rate, the unemployment rate between 20 to 30 years is much higher. Because unemployment rate is considered the total number of people unemployed versus the number of people working. Somehow 30 years and above, they get an employment. So therefore, today we are facing a biggest challenge. We saw what has happened in Bihar. 7,000 vacancies, 3 crore people applied, and that's the situation. And it is not only in Bihar, many other states also same situation. Look at, so who is most affected? Is the youth. I request the youth, why do you go behind job? Why can't you find, business opportunities? And I would suggest is that, see, India, in terms of entrepreneurial scale, India, out of 136 countries, we have 78th position. And if India cannot give employment to all, even if both the public sector and the private sector trying, providing employment to all is very difficult unless many people get into the employment opportunities, self-employment opportunities. Look at proportion of the female, below almost that every 100 lives birth, 34 people die, the children die before they achieve 5 years. That's another challenge. Look at this, the why their child, because of malnourishment, because of early birth, premature birth. I mean, I think there is a lot of solutions we can look into that. And prevalence of malnourishment in the country is 14%. And prevalence of stunting, 34% 7. And prevalence of malnourishment under 5 children is almost 17% 3. And prevalence of malnourishment among under children overweight, it is 1.6. See, these are major challenges which is affecting the SDG number 1, poverty. I think there is a lot of solutions here. And you are looking into finding solutions. And if you really want to find solution to the social problem, you need to be a little more looking into innovations and entrepreneurial solutions for all this problem. Look at women, 18% 7 women whose body mass index is below normal. What can we do for them? 16.2% of men whose body mass index is below normal. 67.1% of children, people between 6 to 59 is, anemic. And women especially, 15 to 49 is also anemic. We can see, this is 6 to 19, it is not 6 to 59, sorry for that. Now look at other statistics, and technology should play a very vital role. And when we say technology, we need to move towards innovations. We need to move towards finding solution to the problems. So technology we can also, when you say innovation, your innovation need not be something out of nothing or something coming out of zero. We can also bring in technologies from north to south. We can bring technologies from America, from the Western country, and reinvent the same things. We can look at how those technology can help the poor and how we can find solution to the most of the social problems in this country. We need to also, we need to develop, promote the development, transfer, and dissemination and diffusion of environmentally sound technologies to developing countries on favorable terms. Also, it is United Nations says that, all the developed countries should share their, technology, share their, knowledge, disseminate their information, which is favorable to the people who are really under, poverty line. And there's a great scope for many of us to come with innovation and finding solution to the various problems and we are facing. It needs huge capacity building. Now look at today, Adamas University doing these capacity building processes. Bringing youth together, make them aware about what the youth can do for the country and finding a solution to the sustainable development goals of the United Nations. So we really need to find solution. Through this kind of seminars and workshop, we will find solution to various problems India is facing. We need to really look at enhance the global macroeconomic stability, including policy coordination and policy coherence. We know that in order to support young entrepreneurs, youth innovators, government also should come out with adequate policy and budget for that. So that could be the kind of a major, policy influence which we need to do. The colleges and the policy makers, we need to, influence, favorable policies for, for most of us. Now, finally, I am coming to the kind of in order to achieve all this, ensure that all this is achieved, there is a greater partnership is required. There is a partnership between government and the academics, partnership between NGOs and government and academics, and the CSR as well as civil society groups. This partnership only we can achieve it. We as a civil society group engaged in promoting entrepreneurship, and we are happy that we are also last few years associated with Adamas University to promote entrepreneurship. I would suggest is that there is a lot of scope for entrepreneurs. There is a lot of scope for innovation. What you need to do is look around you and find problems and convert each problem into solution, and each solution to a business idea. And each business idea is for, there is a group for making a huge impact in the lives of the poor. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to share my few thoughts. I wanted to do films, but show documentaries, but couldn't happen. And probably I can send that documentary films through WhatsApp or through other means, which shows that how we can, lift people below poverty line through education and compassion. That is the two things in the video. So let us be together, let us work towards creating a better world through our skills and knowledge, through innovations and entrepreneurship. Thank you very much. Over to you. Ask any questions.
This wonderful talk. So actually we have made this arrangement in both physical and virtual mode. So our participants are present in the auditorium. So I would like to ask one question that by innovation we are mostly focusing on new inventions, but in the meanwhile some sections of the society are not very much well skilled. So how they can be benefited in terms of economy? Like in agriculture also, previously they used to work on their own, but by the implementation of machines and technologies, they are losing their jobs. So how they can manage their livelihood?
Yeah, I agree with that. You see, see when we also can look into labor oriented technologies. We can also look into how the people also engage in various other activities. We can also look into how we can upskill their knowledge and to create more opportunities. I give an example. I agree with you when we said that unemployment rate in rural area, it is more among men rather than women, because women get opportunities, get work in the agriculture sector. Many women are working in the agriculture sector. I agree with you when the technology comes into the agriculture sector, many of these women will lose their job. But there is our role. Our role is that how can upskill them? How can we give them a more skill towards whatever they have produced there? Probably they could package it. They could come out with small business ideas, and then they can market it. So there is the more technology is coming. That means we need to be more innovative. Okay, that innovation is that I give an example. The example is during this COVID time, many people lost job, but those who switched one job to another, I know they could make a lot of money. We need to find. I give an example of a small. I will give an example of a small woman in Bhopal. She had a kirana dukan. So during COVID, she had to close down the kirana dukan, the general store. But he understood that if the shop is closed, she cannot survive. So what she did, she went to the shop, she packaged various items, 1 kilo, sugar, 2 kilo rice. So she went to home to deliver it, and she could earn a lot of living. So please don't think that when technology is coming, we need to find solution to the problem. Maybe women may be sitting idle. Can we upskill him? Can we make those production probably to how to export that, how to sell that, how to market that, how to we can. There are many farmers produce companies, and they are in the tribal areas. They are converting various food materials into maybe ready to cook items. So see, I think the innovation should also not only in the technology, innovation also should come in our practical life. And if there is an unemployment, and I'm sure that there is a solution to the unemployment, look around that. What are the resources around that? And we can use that resources, and we can ensure that people get economically empowered. So bringing more technology is not an issue. And if that is become a problem, and we need to find a solution to those problems also. And there are solutions. Over to you.
Thank you, sir, for bringing more clarity towards our thoughts. So for today, we will be ending the session, and we will be more than happy if you could join us someday in the campus itself, so that our students can share their ideas with you and seek more guidance from you.
Hopefully, I hope we will get an opportunity to come over there and also interact with the students with innovative ideas and entrepreneurship.
Yes, sure, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
গিয়া চচ্চড়ি দিয়ে
বলে না এবার টক ঝাল মিষ্টি সব হয়ে গেছে।